Hi, I'm Andrew Hollis, Vice President of Slater Infrastructure Group, and I'm here today with Donnell Duncan. With over 15 years of water leadership experience, Donnell Duncan is the Associate Vice President of Arcadis. He serves on the Steel and Composite Tank Committee, and he leads events planning and programming for the Diversity and Member Inclusion Committee of the American Water Works Association. He also serves as the co-chair of the DE&I Board Subcommittee and the House of Delegates Speaker-elect of the Water Environment Federation. Lastly, he was the 2018/2019 winner of the President's Award for Outstanding Leadership and Support of the Georgia Association of Water Professionals. Thank you so much for being here with us today. At Slater, we have a long history of leadership and experience in providing the highest level of customer service and professional responsibility in infrastructure-focused services. We believe in defining and discussing diversity, equity, and inclusion for advancement of knowledge, entrepreneurship, infrastructure, and positively impacting the communities that we serve. We seek to regularly discuss these topics, share our stories, and make progress every day. With that in mind, why is this such an important topic to you, Donnell?
Well, DE&I is personal to me. For some people, it's a topic. It's something to do, something to discuss. For me, it's like being someone who actually started off as a structural engineer. I remember walking into the room at meetings for the Association of the American Concrete Institute or the American Society of Civil Engineers and looking around and being the only person that looked like me. To the point where I may meet one other person that looks like me, and from the side of the room, we would look at each other and wave and be like, what's happening? Because it was interesting. So I know what it's like to be the only. And as a result, it has motivated me to be a part of the solution.
And moving forward, how important do you believe that obviously DE&I will be, especially given the focus of this administration on infrastructure?
So I would say this. DE&I is something that is multi-layered. And the way we approach it from a diversity perspective tends to focus on the workforce. From an equity perspective, tends to focus on our customers, clients, etc. If we talk about water utilities, we talk about the people that are actually drinking the water, the people in the communities. When it speaks of inclusion, we speak of everyone. That's a part of the entire experience. Believe it or not, within the infrastructure bill and the work that's being done, it's interesting that there is a certain amount of attention to equity that's in there, which we're actually happy about. If you really think about how this administration has focused moving forward, there's something called the Justice 40 initiative that impacts the infrastructure money. And basically, order creates a government-wide Justice 40 initiative with the goal of delivering 40% of the overall benefits of relevant federal investments to disadvantaged communities and tracks performance toward the goal through the establishment of an environmental justice scorecard. So this administration is very forthcoming as it pertains to their interpretation of the year.
So what are some of persistent barriers that you've noticed? I know that you spoke about initially in your career how rare it was to find another person that specifically of color that was working with you. But what do you see as some of the barriers today? And how do you see those barriers either evolving or de-evolving due to the work that companies or organizations are doing to address DE&I?
So there's layers. Obviously, there are still some structural barriers in terms of education, just because You can't build a diverse workforce without a pool of diverse workers, without a pipeline. And it goes all the way back to elementary school and pre-K. And if there is a disproportionate caliber of education in communities where communities of color are not getting the same level of education as some more majority communities, you play catch up for the rest of your life. And as a result, by the time you get to us, which is where the industry that's hiring the folks coming out of college and graduate school, you already are at a disadvantage because you just don't have enough people to really make the change. So it has to go all the way back to education at the earliest level possible. It has to go back to the schools in the communities where there are people of color, where there may be disadvantaged communities, to ensure that they are getting the same opportunity to get the same kind of education to get into the top schools, to get the degrees that employers like us want people to have when they are graduating. We can't fix the problem when it's time to graduate. So there are some structural barriers. Then there are some cultural barriers where people are just accustomed to doing business a certain way, doing it with certain people, knowing that in their minds there are certain level of prejudices where you think certain groups are better than others. So you want to do business with this type of company versus that type of company without actually paying attention to what can the people do the work. But I'm just so accustomed to this group, I'm always going to do business with this group. I won't do business with that group. So there are those challenges that come from just cultural barriers. And obviously, if people are accustomed working a certain way, working with certain people, giving contracts to certain people, electing certain people, putting certain people in leadership, it takes systemic change. It takes a different mindset to get people to open up and say, hey, we need to shift our culture to make it more welcoming. We need to shift our culture to be intentional, to increase the level of diversity in our organizations. We need to shift our culture to be intentional, to be equitable in the way we offer services. We need to create that inclusive culture. That has to be something that is intentional. And I believe organizations like EWWA, which leads in the water industry, Water Environment Federation, leading in the wastewater industry, we have been very intentional to formulate task forces and committees and bringing together thought leaders to find solutions, creative solutions to these challenges so that the generation that comes after us and the generation after that would see a better outcome. And of course, as I mentioned, things are happening all the way up the food chain. There's a lot of advocacy that goes on. There's a lot of conversations that happen behind the scenes, which is why even in the infrastructure bill that came out, there's justice in there. There's equity built into it. There's a focus on the disadvantaged communities.
Donnell, to piggyback off what you just said, I just wanted to ask, how could we actively reduce biases during the hiring process for these organizations and companies?
So I'm going to be direct. Unconscious bias training is a great place to start. It can't just be, we want to do better. It has to be, we need to train everybody. This is not an HR thing. This is a hiring manager thing. This is an employee thing. It should be mandatory in all of our organizations that everybody does unconscious bias training. It's the floor. Yeah. Start there.
So to further elaborate on that, what are you mentioned some unconscious biases training, things like that, but habitual behaviors, would that be something like unconscious bias training for leadership and executive team members that would be influencing the hiring practices, maybe like once every 2 weeks or once every week? What would you see more so in terms of very concrete steps to address that within organizations?
So at a minimum, annual unconscious bias training, just as a regular practice where organizations have it, and each person reports on having done it. And then, of course, there must be some way where people are held accountable to some processes in how it's done. For instance, some organizations have come up with the whole concept of panel interviews, and not just panel interviews, but a diverse panel, and being intentional to find diversity in every way possible on the panel so that everybody who comes before the panel has an opportunity to be successful. Things like trying to ensure that people's names on their resume doesn't cause them to be disqualified. Because as soon as you see a certain name, you make an assumption about the person's ethnic background. I don't know if I want her. I don't know if I want him. Like those types of things where organizations have tried and continue to try to find ways to give people a fair shot for their capabilities, their qualifications, their experience, and not their characteristics. Mm-hmm. So that they can be judged based on what they can bring to the organization versus what you think about them because of your prejudices from your own experience and your own background, etc. So starting with something on an annual basis and then creating systemic programming that allows the organization to put some structure into it. So it's not up to me or you to do right. But we set up a structure where you have no choice. Scorecards when you're interviewing so that the panel can each individually do their scorecards. And if we see dramatic variations in the scores, we need to huddle together and understand why we did not get similar results when this should have been an objective evaluation of this candidate. Things along those lines. And of course, metrics, looking at patterns and seeing what is the pattern. If we get 5 candidates and these are the demographics of the candidates, at the end of the year, who got hired the most? And what were the qualifications? Can we find patterns in this to determine whether or not we're dealing with an unconscious bias situation, or if it just happens to be the best candidate got the job?
And how do you think we could better address reports of discriminations within organizations? Now, do you believe that that's just a process of increasing, as you say, these unconscious bias, these trainings, and then also doing internal matrices to show that they're an organization's making more of a move to DE&I, or is it more of a focus on a punishment-based system for the employees that are not as welcoming to diverse recruits?
It's a combination. Obviously, there is a belief that you can get more done with honey than you can with pepper, or you can get more done with kindness and incentives than you can with punishment. So, yes, we want to incentivize it, but there must also be a certain level of accountability. Because one of the things that you realize is the people who are the victims of these biases are typically people who are not in positions of power. So as a result, unless there is structural support for them, where there can be anonymous reporting and then regular check-ins from company leadership on what kind of reports have we been getting, how have they been resolved, what have been the outcomes. The buy-in has to come from the highest level of the organizations, because if people aren't being held accountable for what's happening, nothing changes. So there must be some incentive for a middle manager or low, middle, mid-high level manager or whatever to do right. And if right's not done, to know that somebody's coming behind you to check on that. And you need to take employees seriously. I mean, that's one of the things that I'm proud of at Cadis, where we are. If somebody says, hey, I'm having an issue, we don't say, well, you're low level in the organization, who cares? We say, anyone who says they have an issue, it matters to us. And as a result, you will have an advocate. Because one of the things we see in our company is people first. And when we say people first, we mean all people. So not just people that have big titles in front of their name, but everybody. And that needs to be important. Everybody who's employed in the organization has to feel empowered to say, hey, I'm having an issue, and know there will be no reverberations. Other than, let's address it, let's investigate it, let's see if we can find a solution.
So speaking on that, what do you think organizations should do to properly foster more diverse recruits into leadership positions? Now, do you think they should go out of their way to mentor some of their preferred candidates chosen from these communities to move to elevate further diverse communities in their leadership? Or what are your thoughts on that and moving forward?
I've seen it a couple of ways. I'll tell you what I like. You have to build a pipeline, which means any type of leadership training program, any type of leadership track. Many organizations have used those to select individuals that have shown promise within the organization and set them up and prepare them. Because the challenge is, if people aren't prepared for leadership, when the vacancy comes and you have to make an honest evaluation of which candidate should get that leadership position, people who were not given the opportunity to be prepared will always be at a disadvantage. And you can't be fair as an organization and give somebody who's not qualified or doesn't have the ability a leadership position in the name of, well, we need to diversify. So we have to be training people. Mentorship is important. So I would say leadership training, some kind of leadership track, some kind of leadership program. Mentorship is very, very important. Succession planning that allows for identifying who the next crop of leaders are. So I'll give an example of what we did at our Cadis. 2019. Each of the business lines and each of the leaders within the organization had to select both leaders and emerging leaders from within their particular group for a leadership conference that we hosted internally, and flew everyone that was selected to an off-site location and spent several days of intense training in leadership. Thankfully, I had the opportunity to actually lead one of the training sessions on DE&I, and we had a wonderful team that did the DE&I training. And as a result, I can say with confidence, I know that at that point in time, the senior leaders of the organization within the United States, as well as emerging leaders, all went through the DE&I training that I had an opportunity to lead with an amazing team. And we had all different types of training that allowed us to say, hey, we are going to invest in you because we see you as the future of the organization. And I believe that's the type of thing that we do. And well, we have these Water Leadership Institute. We have this opportunity where people who are emerging leaders can have an opportunity to be trained to become better leaders. I'll give you an example of my own story. I was just a structural engineer in the office, clankety clank, 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 running numbers, calculator guy. That was me, head down. And the Georgia Association of Water Professionals had something called Leadership Academy. And the person that the company selected to be in Leadership Academy pulled out like weeks before it started. So they needed a replacement. So here's the clankety clank guy who gets an opportunity to go to Leadership Academy. That changed my life. That was the beginning. As a result of me having gone to Leadership Academy at the Georgia Association of Water Professionals, I got to meet some people, some of the future leaders of the industry. People that I sat in the same class with are now assistant general managers and directors of engineering and in leadership positions. But we all were in that class together. And it's from that class, that intense training. It was like 6 months of training or whatever with assignments and things like that. Because of that training, I got the opportunity to then lead the diversity committee of the Georgia Association of Water Professionals. And that's what began the snowball that got me into AWWA, WEF, all the national things that I'm doing now, just because of some leadership training. And I believe there's value in leadership training, succession planning, mentorship.
So do you believe that, once again, due to seemingly an intense focus recently of the government, of the administration in infrastructure, do you think we're seeing people that have an increased interest in entering the infrastructure engineering sector?
Well, it's public and it's flashy and there's a lot of noise about it. Anything that publicizes our industry is good. And that's how students select careers. It's either your parents did it or you met somebody in your area. One of the things that I've said that I believe is you can't be what you can't see. You can't be what you can't see. Infrastructure is on every station right now. It's in every magazine, it's in every book. So it's the hot thing right now, just like the tech industry. And the fact that everybody sees the tech industry. Everybody's seeing infrastructure now. It's front and center. So there's a refreshing new excitement about getting into infrastructure, becoming an engineer, becoming a scientist, getting into our fields that we're doing, the STEM industry, and building the country. I mean, that's the thing. Like everybody talks about that amazing generation that built all the expressways and laid all the pipes 100 and something years ago. We get to be that generation now that does it. So 100 years from now, everybody's talking about, remember that generation in 2020s that rebuilt all the roads and the highways and laid the pipes? They're the ones who did it. They did it. They fixed all the bridges 100 and something years ago.
Perfect. So how do you, what concerned effort can we take, do you think, to encourage these younger generations? I know that you had talked about some early education, getting them from middle to elementary school, but just to further cement in their minds that this is a possible field and this is the field that best suits them.
Well, I'll reiterate something where I said you can't be what you can't see. So being proactive, to be visible, and to do a lot more meshing between the professional industry and the education system, where those of us who are professionals, those of us who are in these fields are directly advising and directly providing input into what's happening within education, so that the needs that the industry has are communicated, so that the education system provides for those needs. And being visible. I think, I look back at my own life. I mean, I'm a structural engineer. I did not know one structural engineer growing up. Not one. The reason why I picked my career was I had a buddy whose dad was a geotechnical engineer, and they were rich, and we weren't rich, and nobody else around us were rich. And I was like, what does your dad do? Oh, he's a geotech engineer, geologist. He does geology. I was like, what is that? He's like, well, he works in soils. And I was like, well, I think I found my career. So I started off thinking I was going to be a geologist, just so I could be like his dad. Because you can't be what you can't see. So I was thinking that's what I'm going to be. However, I also love physics. So my first degree is in applied physics. So the blend between physics and geotechnical engineering got me into civil engineering, which then got me into structural. And that's how I ended up where I am. What would have happened if I knew a bunch of structural engineers when I was in elementary school? I mean, that would have been simple. I didn't even know that it existed. And that's the thing. We have to be proactive to expose young people to these fields. These career days are life-changing days. Policemen and firemen and astronauts and everybody gets out there. Everybody, infrastructure folks need to get out there also. Mm-hmm. Like, we need to be in the elementary schools. We need to be in the high schools. And one of the things that we did when I was, I used to lead H2 opportunity at the Georgia Association of Water Professionals. That's the committee responsible for outreach and recruitment. So we were very intentional to come up with programming and to be visible. So we would be at these events talking about careers in water and get volunteers from around the industry in Georgia, people who work at utilities, consultants, manufacturers, etc., to come speak on it and speak to the students. I loved it. It was fun. It was important because a lot of them did not even know what we did. And that's also how you help promote diversity and inclusion, because when people like us show up, they can see, hey, I can do this. Tell me about what you do. And you'll be like, all right, I'll tell you about what I do. And you can be like me.
And I can help companies, or does help companies currently, financially outperform competitors.
So we do know from the statistics about how companies that are more diverse, are more productive, and they get better results. So I won't regurgitate those statistics. Every time I go to a presentation, people give me the same statistics, so I'm bored of those. But I will say this. Number one, employee morale. If I feel like I matter, I'll run through a wall for you. And that's important. And if I work in an inclusive environment, the probability that I'll stay there longer and I'll work harder and I'll feel more vested is much higher. Number one. Number two, diversity fosters creativity and innovation. One of the things I saw in a research paper is that sometimes when you're in a room, it's the person with the different perspective that provides the non-obvious alternatives to the discussion. Because if everybody's the same, one of the people who's always sitting in the room is Captain Obvious. Because everybody's always saying the obvious. Because we all know each other, we all do it the same way. This is how we've always done it. And it's important to have a diverse group so that people say things that you wouldn't even think about, like totally outside of the norm, the things that are non-obvious. Number three, it helps with recruiting. It helps with getting the best. I'll tell you how I came to the company I'm at right now. I had a great job. Loved it. I was happy. I didn't want to leave. And a recruiter kept bothering me. Oh, come talk to me. Come talk to me. I got this job here. I got this job here. I was like, please, I'm good. Eventually, I was like, all right. Let me come talk to these people. Sitting across the table from me was a black man who sounded like me, who looked like me, who was a regional vice president of the company. I had never seen that before. I'm like, really? You can't be what you can't see.
Mm-hmm.
So having diverse leadership inspires people like me who would have kept my talents wherever I was to say, hey, let's talk. It helps with recruiting. It helps with getting the best for the best. Because the truth is, there's a lot of people who say, man, we can't really make anything in diversity because there's nobody out there. No, stop it. There are people out there who just don't want to work for you. That's the point. They're out there, they just don't work for you. Because when you show up, they look around and they're like, I'm not going to work in an environment like this. I don't need to deal with this. If I don't see diversity in leadership, I don't want to be a part of that because I know what it's like being in an environment where I'm the owner. I know what it's like feeling like there's nobody advocating for you, that nobody cares about you, that you're just over here fighting up by yourself, trying to make it. I don't need that in my life. So when you go into an organization that's diverse, recruiting is so much easier. When there's gender diversity, you can see people's face light up when someone walks in the room that looks like them. They're like, ooh, hold on. And you're on the board? Yeah. There's possibilities for you too. Come work for us. Mm-hmm. And then what happens is there is a level of built-in, what's the word? Empathy. What do I mean by that? If you and I have a similar background, I feel it. I understand. It's true that anyone can empathize with anyone. But there's a higher probability that if you've experienced, somebody experiences somebody's been through, you can empathize. And that's why when you have a diverse leadership, when you have a diverse organization, employees can feel like, hey, I can talk to somebody who's going to care, who's going to listen to me, because that person knows what it's like. That's why my team can come talk to me about certain things. I've been there. I'll be like, bro, I understand. I could be like, let me tell you this. I've been there. Let me help you.
So what do you think, Donnell, kind of speaking towards our efforts and speaking towards a positive future, what does an ideal future look like for DE&I in the infrastructure engineering sector?
So things are getting better. I mean, the mere fact that I am where I am means things are getting better because opportunities are beginning to pop up. 2020 was a game changer for our industry. Obviously, it was a game changer for everybody. But all of a sudden, people have become sensitive to the needs for diversity, equity, and inclusion in their organization. And it's great. And look at what we're doing at the Water Environment Federation. I mean, at the highest level, it's built into the organization's principles. It's built into the culture at AWREA. I mean, I sit at the table and we just worked on our D&I policy, and it's built into how we lead and how we do what we do. So I know that around the country, these best practices are being shared. One of the things we did at WEF is we actually developed tools to help organizations and help some of our member associations around the country to actually develop their own diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, so that if they start from scratch, they have somewhere to start from, they have something to work with. They're not over there trying to figure things out. Yeah. The future is bright, where everyone that needs an opportunity, that's willing to put in the work, will get it. I'm not saying you're going to get it everywhere, but you can find a place where you'll get it. So you may need to quit a job here and there, let's keep it real. But there is somewhere you are going to fit. There is somewhere in this industry where you will get an opportunity. It's not where it was. It's getting better, and it keeps getting better. So I'm very optimistic.
Well, perfect. I just wanted to, once again, thank you again, Donnell, for doing such critical work in the industry. We believe that it is vital to start a conversation through various platforms and share stories to promote best practices. On behalf of the entire team at Slater, I'd like to say thank you for your continued efforts towards DE&I. And it was truly a privilege to talk to you today. And I just wanted to thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. And it is a privilege to always speak on this very important topic.
Thank you, Donnell.